We will amend them.
Oh, so we're live? Okay, go ahead.
All right. It is 10:03. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is, Mike, I don't even know the date, the 13th of December. We do have a quorum. Commissioner Doak is not here today.
Oh, so we're live? Okay, go ahead.
All right. It is 10:03. We will go ahead and call the meeting to order. It is, Mike, I don't even know the date, the 13th of December. We do have a quorum. Commissioner Doak is not here today.
Oh, so we're live? Okay, go ahead.
All right. It is 10:03. We will go ahead and call the meeting.
Forever looped.
That's hilarious. All right, we do have a quorum. Do we have a motion to accept or amend the, oh, not the minutes, sorry, the staff report as presented?
I'll make a motion, we accept staff report.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have a motion to amend or correct the minutes from the November 8th meeting?
Madam Chairman, I do have a correction on public hearing number 1 on page 2 of 8. It says Commissioner Richards, Commissioner Doak declare conflicts of interest. That should be Commissioner Gerard and Commissioner Doak.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes as amended.
I'll
Thank you.
second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And, oh, I didn't know if it was Megan, Eric, I guess you. It's my understanding that the 2 public hearings that we had last month, there were some changes at the commissioners meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, let me, if you can just take a moment because I'm doing minutes and
Oh, you bet.
hold on just a second. So, Madam Chair, so the changes that were made on the approval of the temporary dwelling, so there were a little bit of changes from the Planning and Zoning Commission. There were 4 conditions that were passed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So let's talk about the dwelling first. And so what the Planning and Zoning Commission, when there's a temporary dwelling, shall include the 5th wheel and the covered porch. There was a 3-year time frame from the date of the commissioners. And then there was a 12 by 20 covered porch will need to be permitted as accessory afterward. And then the 3rd was the primary dwelling had not been completed within the 3-year. The 12 by 20 porch will need to be removed from the property. And it could not be removed, renewed, or extended. So what happened when we went to the commissioners, it was amended down to 2 years with the ability to extend another additional year. Okay, from the approval of the Planning and Zoning and the Board of County Commissioners. So that was the big change there. It was still just concerns of the structure, the time period being extended out to 3 years. So they will have to come back and ask for an extension and it's more of a check-in to see, where they're at after the 2 years. And I believe let's see here, and I'll get to and I believe it's the same thing. So when we got to the actual temporary storage, same thing, 2 years with the ability to extend an additional year. So again, that was the big change between the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of County Commissioners. So.
Thank you.
And I appreciate Commissioner Richards for bringing that forward in the meetings. It's kind of seems to move through seamlessly when it's come forward. And so
Yes.
there's some decent compromises and we're still hitting the objective that we need to hit when we're putting those forward. So I appreciate that.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. All right, well, we only have actually one public hearing today. That's a little different than we've had the majority of the year. This one is Land Use Department. We have a language amendment, zoning resolution, and housing amendments. Go ahead and turn it over to you, Eric.
So thank you, Madam Chair. As promised, we went through and did some amendments to address the housing shortage, to increase densities in a specific zone district. So we'll go through those. They're pretty straightforward. You know, there's not a lot of language associated with this, but there are numbers associated. And then we have Andy Hooten from the County Engineering Department here also. Any input that he may have or any questions as we go through this. So, and just so you're aware too, there's some legislation that's being proposed on accessory dwelling units that would take away some home rule from the county that work staff is concerned about. Commissioner Richards is aware of it too. I did testify at the Regulatory Reduction Committee. And right now we're working with the Wyoming Commissioners Association and with WildPass with the Wyoming Planners Association to address that. The legislators are under the impression that accessory dwelling units is one of the solutions to the shortage of housing. One of the things that I did state in my testimony was it's really infrastructure as we see it. We allow accessory dwelling units right now in the county, and we're actually not very restrictive on that. And we've only seen maybe a handful or maybe 10 in the last few years. And so it does help with obviously housing choices, but really when it comes down to it is when all these workers are coming in, they're looking for reasonable priced properties. And the way you can do that is reducing density. So you're not buying a lot of property, you know, and being able to actually construct on there. So that's what we did. We went through and we made some changes. What we did is, so in the first one, I'm going to go to is in the establishment of zoning districts. This is 3C. So the first change that we made, instead of calling it multifamily, we're calling it high density residential. Any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Okay, I just thought it was more appropriate. And then that's really all the changes there on that page. And then on the next one, on the R3, on the establishment of zoning districts, on the purpose statements, under R3, again, changing it to high density residential. And then this district is intended to accommodate high density residential opportunities. So that's really all the changes there. Like I said, there's not a lot of verbiage here. And then in the next thing in the minimum district size. So wanted a little discussion here on this. So currently under R3, which was the multifamily residential, we had 5 acres. And so wanted to see what your thoughts are on reducing it maybe to 1 acre. And the purpose of that was if you had a subdivision, residential subdivision, and you wanted to have some mixed zoning in there. So if you wanted to have, let's say, certain specific area for townhomes, let's say that's what you wanted, or duplexes, and then the other area reserved for R1, for let's say single family dwellings. Now I know in the R3 district, the way we've got this proposed, it allows for single family dwellings, so you could zone the entire property or subdivision R3 and have single family dwellings, and you could have townhomes. The concern there would be is if you let's say on those single family lots, you never wanted those to ever be, uh, townhomes or multifamily. So you wanted to zone it R1, so it was only specifically, you would only allow single family dwelling, but never in the future could you make higher density or splitting the lots and things like that. So that would give the option for someone subdividing to do a section of R3 was just dedicated to townhomes for the future on, and then dedicate a section for R1. If you made it 5 acres, that could, do you see what I'm saying? It could make it really large area, 5 acres. It could just give them a little more flexibility, we thought. And I just wanted to see any impressions that you had about that. Any thoughts?
I got a question.
Sure.
So, looking at this, my thought is, because I know people come in, get their zoning changed in areas, go out north town, you get a guy who has a 1 acre lot and says, I want to turn this into duplexes. You know, his neighbors
Mhm.
don't care, but I mean, are we a way to mitigate that from happening, or are we just looking, everything's gonna get broke down into littler chunks as
Yeah.
time goes on?
And that's a good point. So that's one thing to look at, right? So that's why I wanted a discussion. I'm glad you brought that up because it would, so let's say you had a lot in Mountaineer and you wanted to rezone it to, which
Mhm.
they are 1 acre lots, right?
Right.
And so you could rezone that to R3 and then technically like what your do duplexes in there, which would be of concern for, because White Mountain Water and Sewer was not excited about these
And
amendments
that
at all.
was one of my other questions.
Yeah.
Going down,
Mhm.
and I know it's not it's not our biggest look, is the infrastructure, is the water lines that are going into there, is the sewer capable of handling that
Mhm.
up of density of people start doing that in already existing areas that are broken like R2 1 acre lots, or, you know, mountain
Right.
or something like
Right.
that, you know, I don't know their infrastructure, you know, whether they're getting enough water to add a third more people within the same
Right.
area, or those questions I had, I was.
You know, Mountaineer does have a lot size overlay on it, so it's 1 acre, so they're not supposed to be further split. But you start getting into zone changes like that. I see your point of the R3. And let's say you did remove that minimum district size. There's gonna be a lot of heartburn on that, because from what I'm understanding, they have concerns of their infrastructure expanding to these really smaller, like they're not in favor of it. This is something they don't want to see up in that area, in that district. That's what I understand from their district and the letter and the comments that I got. So,
And then I was just looking at minimum district sizes. If you're gonna have minimum district sizes for R2, R1, where, you know, everybody's got their minimum district sizes, why are we gonna give somebody else a free pass? Okay, you don't have to go that big, you know, I mean, I understand the guy who's building a 40 acre development, okay, I'd like to put an acre of duplexes over here, but, you know, it's still I mean, it's still something we can deal with at a one-time thing, but as a norm, I just, my brain says that's too small of a district.
okay, I'm
You
fine with
know,
that.
I may be wrong, but
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think kind of what you're getting at is if each individual lot, 1 acre, wants to do it, then they can go ahead and do it. But for the big ones, we can set aside, in your example, 40 acres, we can do 39 as this and then 1 is this. So I think in that case, it would probably be okay, but we don't want each individual lot that's already existing to be able to do that.
right.
Yeah, that's
If somebody's doing a big development and they're coming in with a plan, says, okay, we want to do this, this, and this, I'm like, you know, break it out in how you want and
Yeah.
do your development. But I still think we need to look at the guy who's got an acre in the middle of one area and say, okay, let's carve this up into a bunch of new lots and, you know, if it's already an established area. If everybody wants to do it, then that would be 5 acres. If 5 neighbors wanted to do it, put them together and they can do it.
Yeah.
Or 2 neighbors or, I don't know, just the way I'm looking at it. I might be wrong.
Is there a way to limit that so that maybe it's only during like a preliminary lot approval or something like that, where if it's already existing, we can not allow a change like that? Cause I think I see the concern.
Yeah, no, I totally do. I mean, and I'm good with keeping it at 5 acres. I just wanted to throw it out there. I'm okay with zoning 5 acres of a subdivision. Or, you know, that would be the minimum
Yeah.
district size.
I
I'm-
think the 5 acres.
And if we want to
is
stick
good.
with that, I'm,
Because even if
Yeah.
there are 3, they can go.
Yeah.
larger.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they can build bigger lots.
Yeah,
than
just,
that.
Yeah.
just how do you limit that from happening? You know,
right. It's difficult. Yeah. I don't know what tool you could use. Yeah.
New Subdivisions on.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
I guess, and then you're limiting that way too, if you say it's just on a brand new subdivision and.
Right, right.
Okay. So we're just going to put that as 5 acres for now. Okay. All good points. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna, this is kind of a weird thing, but it's just because it came up. So we're gonna talk about quarries. Just because we're in the district use chart, it just came up. So DEQ changed the regulations from 10 to 15 on there that are exempt from certain requirements. So we're just asking to change that so that it matches DEQ regulations, which is where we were before. And actually, the language was actually inaccurate because it was said under 10 acres. It should have been 10 acres and under. So we actually needed a correction there. But that's that we thought, since we're already open the district use chart,
Yeah.
why not? Okay, that's all that is there. Okay. All right, so this is the meat and potatoes of everything, of the changes. So right at the top there, we have, it was actually written incorrectly. It said minimum lot to depth width ratio, which it was 2.5 to 1. So you were saying, which was an odd statement, it should have always been maximum lot to width. Because you're telling someone, you better build a lot 100 by 250. You couldn't make a square. So it was actually, we looked at that and no wonder it was confusing. It was supposed to say maximum. So we want to increase that to 1 by 4. Looked at a lot of different counties. And if you notice, we've been doing a lot of variances on lot to depth width
Yeah.
ratio. And it really, so then you know there needs to be a change in the regulation. When you're having almost every subdivision do a lot to depth width ratio, you are basically need to change the regulation. So we were wanting to change that to 1 by 4. Any concerns about that? We didn't see any issues with that. That would offer a little some flexibility, and sometimes you get into those lots. Rob is an engineer. He understands sometimes on a curve, you get things get a little weird, and this would actually allow some more flexibility that way. I just thought 1 and 2.5 was just too restrictive.
Oh, I agree.
Okay. And it'll also help when we get into higher density lots too. And I will say this, we're saying high density, this is high density for the county. High density in the city is a whole other animal. So, okay. All right. So, and then as you go across the column, we're just clarifying there where it says permitted and accessory. It really should say primary and accessory. That's how the language is, primary structure. It's not permitted structure. So that was a little bit confusing. So we changed all that to match what's in the code. So it's all matching together. Okay. And then we go down into the next column, just so you know, we are crossing out the 5 acre. That actually went through a language amendment process. I'm just double bootstrapping here to make sure that that gets changed, because for some reason it's still in the book. So because of the exemption laws that went through, the state legislator passed, we no longer can regulate 5 acres. So on family exemptions, so that we remove that. So that's just more of a change to reflect what we've done in previous amendments. So that none of that has changed. Okay, so now this is where things are changing, where we're wanting to reduce R1 down to 8,000 square feet to match what we're doing down in R3. I did not see any reason for that extra 500 square feet. We were okay with reducing that down to 8,000 square feet. Any questions on that? And then just as you go over in that column too, reducing down that open space requirement from 50 to 40. Okay, everything else is pretty much changing the same in R2 and R2SF except for the minimum front lot to dip width ratio. And by the way, we will have a definition in the footnotes when we get down to it so that future staff and the commissioners and the Planning and Zoning Commission understand how to calculate it. Okay, so R3 high density residential. So this is the big changes here. So 4,000 square feet. This is something we talked about. We had kind of a workshop a few months ago, and I was under the impression that we did not want to go under 8,000 square feet. So basically 8,000 square foot lot, and then splitting that with a common wall would be right on the property line. So the smallest we would ever go on a duplex would be 4,000 on one side and 4,000 on the other. So then you have to adjust your lot width, because now you're reducing down to a 4,000 square foot lot. That would be very difficult to have a 100-foot front line. So we reduce that down to 40 for the 4,000 square foot lot and 80 for the 8,000 square foot lot. So basically you could have an 80 by 100 lot. And then the minimum setback requirements, you would go down to the footnotes.
Footnote 14 reads minimum lot size 4,000 square foot for a 2-family dwellings that share a common wall. Single family dwelling units, minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. Minimum lot sizes for all other residential development is 1 acre and 2 acres if no public water or sewer is available. Minimum lot frontage for 4,000 square foot lots is 40 feet and 80 for lots greater than 8,000 square feet.
Any questions on that? One thing I want to bring up, and I've got Jim here, and Jim, if you could join in with us and explain where the county kind of sits at as far as fire code and what would be expected. Just, we do not have the International Residential Code.
Right.
So the cities do. And there are certain things that will not be inspected like the city will. So when we start attaching these structures together, we do have the fire code, but there's going to be a little bit of difference here between what the city has and then what the county. Go ahead, Jim.
You're referring to the separation on a town?
Yes, just what the requirements would be for the wall.
Okay, so,
And maybe the difference so that they understand, like if we did have residential code, which we don't, and the difference between that and the fire code, it's going to be.
so basically, we would look at the whole structure. That's the way fire looks at. So in that sense, it would be a mixed occupancy under the fire code. It would be an R3 and an R3. It's still mixed occupancy because it's not one unit, it's 2 units. So at that point, when you go into the charts into the IFC, an R3 separated from an R3 has got to have a 2-hour firewall. So we're going to end up with masonry, or we're going to end up with stud with certain insulation and a double X drywall. So it's the way fire code's going to look at it is they're going to look at it as a fire mitigation thing. So if it's connected, it's got to be separated, or in place of that is actually sprinklers. That's where it comes into, but that's not really in our game plan. So it would be a firewall. So it'd be a 2-hour firewall, and that would be inspected
Okay, that was my
by
question.
myself.
Okay.
Yeah, that is one thing. Normally, we don't inspect framing or anything. We don't have, like Eric said, we don't have that under, haven't adopted a building code. But under the fire code, I've got to inspect that it matches for a 2-hour separation. And it's got to go all the way to the top and all the way to the bottom.
What about structurals, just so they understand? So is there going to be any like someone could turn in a drawing with an architect stamp saying it's structurally solid, but will there be any inspection on that structural?
Yeah, I would still inspect it, but if we have a stamped drawing by a Wyoming engineer, I can receive that as it's 2-hour. So they may go about it a different way. So and an engineer can stamp that and override that. But I would have to have those documents on file to allow that. And then once I have the documents, then it would include a drawing that I would inspect by. But normal inspection would be out of the book, and all the different ways that you can get a 2-hour wall is given in the building code, and the IFC references that. So I can use that. I can pull that out of the building code, and I can actually inspect any of those different ways. But I've had, when I first started here, I had people that have had to put up a 3-hour firewall, and the engineered it different than anything I had in my books. But as long as he was able to stamp it, I engineered to his drawings.
I hope, yep.
I don't know if you have any questions for Jim? Okay, all right. So that's what we're looking at. So as far as the setbacks go, so it would be a 0 setback in that situation where you have a duplex. Let's see here. So on a single family dwelling, they're required to maintain a side setback of 10 feet. For a 2-family dwelling that share a common wall, it'd be 15 feet on the non-party wall side. So
their setbacks are gonna remain the same on the other 3 sides, just the neutral side, they're getting a 0.
correct. Well, yeah, so there has been an adjustment on because this came up at the workshop, was a discussion of parking. And so we are gonna, so to answer the question, 25 feet will stay the same on that won't change. Because the city does allow 20 feet, and where we see issues is a lot of people have trucks, they have longer vehicles. And then just even going through some of the subdivisions in Rock Springs, the vehicles are sticking out on the sidewalk. Some of them are out in the street. So that was a concern that was brought up. The 15-foot setback, the reason for that is to allow, if you want to park an RV or such on the side of the house, you can do that. So that was the 15-foot on the dwelling, on the duplex side. So we put a 15-foot setback in there because I believe it's 10 feet normally. Okay, so it is a little bit more restrictive. You are going to have a smaller lot, but you're gonna,
We're 10 foot on the other ones.
Yeah.
So.
yeah. And that was the reason for the 15-foot. Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to say we're not changing, we're staying the same,
Yeah.
with
I mean,
the
basically.
exception of the center.
You're taking it, right, so,
Trying to make it less complicated. in my head.
so
We're only changing the center line to 0.
think of think of it this way, is you're putting in on an 8,000 square foot lot, which is what we're going to allow in R1 also, okay, as a single family dwelling. You're now we're going to allow a duplex on there, and you're going to allow a property line through the middle of it, is what we're doing. Go ahead, Jim.
Just to give you another example, right now in the fire code, a fire wall or a fire barrier can replace distance. So right now we have a house needs to be separated from its accessory structure by 5 feet. And that allows for scuba, that allows for firemen to self-contained breathing apparatus to get between those buildings. So the minute that you want to bring them closer together.
Okay.
You can bring them closer together and replace it with a firewall that will contain the fire to one side or the other. So a firewall, a fire barrier is simply something that allows you to place a structured, fire-resistant barrier and reduce the amount of feet that's needed. We do it all the time, especially in Clearview Improvement District, where they want to put up a garage or something, they just can't get it in, just that simple. So they end up with just a sidewalk between the garage and the house. Well, then the whole length of the house or the whole length of the garage that's within, they have to have a 1 hour on that from an accessory to an R3. So it's just a way simply to say that we're allowing it to be reduced. And that's the whole premises behind the townhouse. It's attached. So there's got to be that separation, which allows the firewall, which allows the separation to be reduced, in this case to 0. But we do it now. It's just modifying it for this R3 high density.
So just to address in this, to clarify, so, and that's a discussion point that we wanted to bring up. So right now, the side setback on a house is 10 feet.
Right.
Okay, so on a higher density, I wanted to talk about, do we want to go a little bit larger to 15 feet? So that would be a difference between 10 and 15. The purpose of that would be, because obviously it's going to be a smaller lot, and you can start getting into higher density, less room. Are we okay? Do we want to put a little bit more of a setback to allow for parking of other vehicles and things like that? So that's the discussion point, just to clarify, because it's not exactly the same what we've got written here. Or do we want to just go to 10 feet on the sides?
I thought that's why we had the discussion with that, like you said, because of the lot size, because of parking, because of motorhomes, boats, stuff like that, that we wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be out on the street or somewhere else where it really doesn't need to be. Right. And that's why I think the extra 5 feet allows that to be an option and still be able to walk past the house when something's back there. So I agree on the 15.
I
think
do
that's
too. I
what
like
needs to happen.
Oh, I like the 15.
Okay. Okay. So that's how the setbacks will work. The open space, obviously, we're going to have to reduce down to 20%. When you get to smaller lots, 40% would become very difficult to do. So that would need to be reduced. Some of the other changes that you see in there on that chart are just some clarification where we had 7,500. We put a SF for square feet, and the same thing down in the B retail business. Just time for cleanup down there. Down in the footnotes, some cleanup language there too. So if no centralized water, and just so you know, we are talking about, you got to be on water and sewer when we're doing, there's no question when we're doing these smaller, higher density. But so the way the current language that we have is if no centralized water and sewer, minimum lot size is 2 acres. And unless the parcel is located within the growth management area, both water and sewer are required for lots under 2 acres. And that's all that is clarifying what is in the code. One goal that I have this next year is to get in and consolidate the growth management requirements and get what we need out of there and put it into the zoning, because there's a lot of confusion. We've got some new staff coming in, and in the future that we're going to one book and not to a growth management and a zoning. Because what happens is we've even had this come up where variances, we thought we were covering the variances that were needed, and then they have to go back and do another variance. And so, because just trying to pull up 2 codes, the way they're written right now can be confusing, and for the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Board of County Commissioners. So we're going to try to consolidate that down and take the stuff out that's not needed anymore, that we're covered. So anyway, that's what that change is. Then you go down into the fencing. We're changing the words residences to single family dwelling. Again, cleanup language so that it's understood that it matches the rest of the code. There's consistency through the code. On footnote 6, on the spacing, this is again cleanup language, adding the requirement of 5-foot minimum spacing between detached structures. Because someone could take that as, well, I have an attached structure, now do I have to put it 5 feet away? That doesn't make any sense. But this is to clean that up, because if you have an attached garage, that is an accessory structure on its own. It's not part of the dwelling. So those should be able to be attached to a zero, right? So that, just to clarify, we put detached structure in there. And then down, and we've kind of gone over this, this is we went over the single family dwelling requirements on the 10 feet and the 15 feet, the International Fire Code requirements. And then what we did, on the next footnote, minimum lot size is going to be the 4,000 square feet. The shared common wall, single family dwelling units, lot size is 8,000. And the minimum lot size for all residential development is 1 acre and 2 acres if no public water and sewer. So that's talking about other types of other developments that are allowed in that zone district. The minimum, then, this is an important thing too, measuring lot width to depth at front line. So this is a request of staff to me. Please define how we're supposed to measure this thing. So lot width is the horizontal, and we have a diagram for those that need that. So it's lot width is the horizontal distance between the side lot lines measured at a right angle to the lot depth at a point midway between the front line and rear line. And the lot depth is measured along an imaginary straight line drawn from the midpoint of the front property line on the lot width to the midpoint of the rear line. Don't worry, there won't be a test on this afterwards. Or the most distant point or any other lot where there is no rear lot line. So for those who are like, what the heck does that mean? Here's the diagram to show you. So as you can see on there, it's showing the, just, so basically you got a rear line, and so on a rectangular lot, pretty easy, right? So that you're, going from the front to the back, midline, pretty basic. But it, again, when you get into these pie-shaped lots and you get on the cul-de-sacs and such, things get a little trickier. So what you're doing is a midpoint, and then you measure the lot width there. Because we just didn't have any way, there was no definition, and you just, well, I guess they need a variance on this one. So, so this, basically take that midline and measure, and take the average. So any questions on that? Yeah, no, it's, yeah, right? Thank you.
I like it too.
It's the interpretation.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
This is a beautiful diagram drawn by Ms. Toomer. Kind of shows you, and we showed this the last time. So this is kind of, obviously things are going to look a little bit different. But just kind of how this fits in. This is why we're having that discussion, but this is kind of, with a 40-foot layout, front line, 8,000 square foot lot with a duplex in the middle. There's the garage, usually just how they're built. Usually the garage, you have the first floor, you have a garage, and then you've got rooms up above it. And then it's kind of receded back a little bit, but the front setback would be taken from that front garage. And then just kind of a hypothetical 24 by 30 residence, structure. Usually there's 2 to 3 stories, these structures. Kind of shows you there. It does show a 10-foot, but and then with the 16-foot setback, right, Megan? And then with the rear setback. Not giant backyards, but again, this just helps out with people being able to store things on the side there. And then think of it this way, you have a less yard to worry about in the back, right? But that's kind of just how things would look, kind of what we showed you the last time between those 4,000 square foot lots.
Eric,
Go ahead.
I do have one question, and I don't know if we want to go over it or not, but did we want to discuss the height, the maximum
yeah.
height in R3? I know we had kind of gone back and forth about it. If it's not something that we propose to change, but maybe have a discussion since we were kind of hashing everything out as well.
Thank you, Megan. Yeah, so the current height is 35 feet. Question for you, Madam Chair, is You're in the real estate business. Is that a reasonable height, or do we need to go higher than that with a townhome structure? Okay,
That's a good question. Possibly, yes. I mean, if we're gonna go high density and our lots are not that, at least they're not 3,000 square foot lots. I do like the 4. It is something we probably need to look at while we're doing this.
and the question is how high?
I know, exactly. that is-
So I had in there 50 feet, which is pretty tall.
Mhm.
I don't know. Go ahead, Rob.
Does any of our regulation have a limit on how many floors you can have?
No.
So if you were to do like 3 stories, time you get the floor and
Yeah.
floors in there, you're looking at least 10 feet. So a 3-story, you're at 30 feet, then you got the pitch of your roof and everything to get
Right.
drainage it off of it. So
Right.
the 35 could get tight. Something like 40, 45, but if you want to allow like 4 stories or something, then you're gonna have to be even
Yeah.
taller. So,
Madam Chair, one of the other things that we discussed is, do we want to allow more than 2 floors? Like this is our way, since we don't have regulations on number of floors, is restricting the height of what can and can't be built on there. Are we okay? I mean, I don't know all of the townhomes that are in Rock Springs, but most of the ones that I know of are 2 floors. If they do have one, it's a basement.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of a discussion that we kind of just kept kind of going back and forth on, and was just more looking for more input on, are we missing anything? Do we want to leave it as now? And then if we run into problems, we can always go back and change the code later, just kind of what other people have noticed as well.
And I think typically they are too, and some do have basements, not all of them by any means, but, I can't think of any that we have that are 3-story. I mean, some definitely taller than others.
if you had a walkout basement,
Mhm.
then it would be 3 stories on that one side.
Yeah. I just don't know. I guess my thought is we're looking at a housing shortage. I don't know how important a walkout basement necessarily, or is a developer gonna wanna put that money in doing that, where I don't think they would do 3-story. I can't speak for them, obviously, but I would think 2-story is high, is enough.
We can start with that, and I believe that's what proposals I've seen. Question for Jim is, I know things start to get interesting when you start adding stories on especially
Yeah.
with fire code.
Yeah, it depends on what your responding fire agency can handle.
Yeah.
So, and to speak to the walkout basement, under the code, the way you measure height is you take that midpoint between the sloped lot from where you walk out to the front, you take a midpoint, that's where you measure your height. So it isn't the full
It is
floor.
not the ground.
Oh.
It's just similar to the lot, the lot that, the width depth. You
Okay.
take it at the midpoint, that's the same way you measure height on a building. But that's a very good point. Some of your, fire agencies are not gonna be equipped to do a 50-foot building. So, something good to take.
And then I think both would have to be the same height
Oh,
on the wall. And so is that gonna be a silly deal, you
Yeah.
got that, so. Yeah, I think we can limit it to 2-story versus a height and leave it at 35. Yeah, and then that way I think if there's somebody that wants to come in and do something a little bit different, then look at it that way.
Yeah, I think for townhomes, 35 with 2 stories would be enough.
Probably not.
You know, anything taller, it'd be more like an apartment building.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's leave.
Okay.
Like, one question I've got, Eric, is what about fencing? And because we have 2 structures on one lot, and typically I see the driveways or common driveway going up into both garages. But on the back end, is there a requirement for any fencing? The front of the structure and separation of the lot, or?
No.
That's something we need to look at.
So when we do that was something that you probably put into the subdivision regulations if you, on fencing. State made some interesting changes to the fencing requirements. So if you're adjacent to a lot, a parcel that grazes, the subdivider has to put a fence in, and then the subdivider has to pay for it. That's state statute now. They passed that at the last session.
Around the entire subdivision.
I was not in favor of that, but it is what it is and it passed, but it's a state requirement. So what's that? Megan?
It's around the entire subdivision.
Yeah,
but it
around
has
the
to be
entire
fenced.
subdivision. So that could become interesting, but to answer your question, no, we don't have any, that would be something we'd have to look in the subdivision requirements. So we're gonna leave that at 35 feet, it sounds like for right now. Because Jim brought that up and Megan asked me the question on number 2, footnote number 2, our zoning height measurement does not match the fire code. How would everybody feel about us doing that? I think that'd be good to actually match how you're measuring height compared to what zoning is. Or do you think we need to? Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
One change we could make in there under footnote number 2 is just maximum height shall be in accordance with the International Fire Code, most recently adopted. Or do you think, just because the way it reads now is maximum height shall be measured from the highest elevation of the finished grade to where it connects to the building? Okay, okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. That might be a future change. Okay. All right. Any questions on, and then I think that's it. Megan, I don't think there was anything else. We didn't do definitions or anything, so.
Yeah, we thought we might get into parking and definitions, but I don't think we ended up making any changes as of right now.
Nope. That's all we have, Madam Chair.
Which is a lot and not all at the same time. I think we definitely, it needs addressed. I mean, we have a housing shortage. We're all very aware. And I think this will help address it. I truly do. At least give us something out there to go off of.
Madam Chair, Andy, did you have any concerns or?
Gonna ask that too.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you guys want to add?
gonna put him on
or
the spot.
input? I know, let's hear it.
Madam Chair, members of the P and Z board. No huge concerns, more of ideas to think about. I understand the 15-foot and I heard there was a large discussion on toys and spacing. I think that's a good thing. Double-edged sword, you're going to restrict the size of the lot and what housing layouts can be done. So there's only so much ground in that 4,008 split in 2. There's only so much area. And so when you have those bigger setbacks, you're going to restrict some of those layouts. So not saying one's right, not saying one's wrong, saying it's things for you guys to consider. The only other thing I really have a thought on is there's other types of affordable housing as well. So when you look at the other parts of the regulation, the mobile home zone, you can also do 8,000 square foot for one trailer. So as a developer, you're going to look at that and say, okay, I can put on 8,000, I can put 2 townhomes, or I can put 1 trailer. That's for them to decide and consider the cost benefit of that. And it's for the commissioners and you to decide what type of development you want to see within Sweetwater County. So I won't really say one's right or wrong. I will say that there are things that, are they equal? Are we pushing towards one way? to provide affordable housing. It's been brought up and it needs addressed. So I think it's good, but I think it's just another thing for you guys to consider. So that was really all I would say on those, Eric, because, you know, when you look at it as a whole, we're addressing high density. There's other forms of high density as well in our code. So that's for you guys to consider and think about. So that's really
That's a
all
great point, because I had not thought of it that way. I mean, as far as we have some mobile home district, not districts, but overlays out there that, yeah, okay, thank you. That is, yeah, I had not thought about it that way.
So we'll ride the fence, give you something to think about. How about that?
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
Anybody else have
Members
any
of the board?
questions for Andy?
So how's everybody feeling about the 15?
Oh, that's hard. I go back and
So
forth. with it.
that's, because they'll defeat the purpose if they come in and they need a variance for every lot, and we don't want to do that.
Like, just driving through some of the townhome subdivisions that are out there, I mean, everybody's parking on the street.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
It's horrible. You can't hardly go up and down some
Yeah,
streets.
and so
because
I
there's
still
so-
think 15, yeah, I get it, but it's 5 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that gives another option for, because either that or they need to have a storage lot as part of,
Yes.
as part of their subdivision.
Damage part.
So I think there's some other ways to do that and accomplish that, but right now, I mean, it's on the street.
Yeah.
And they don't move, you know, for the most part of it, and it's
Yeah.
not just a motor home or a boat, but it's trailers, and everything else that goes along with the rest of the toys that everybody has here.
Yeah.
that you can put in. So I'd like to stick with 15 is my 2 cents on it, because I think that gives it an option where we can move that kind of off, and they can utilize that for that.
Okay.
When it doesn't work, we
And
can come back.
that's the minimum size.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody wants a bigger house or a different layout, they can do 5,000. They can go to 10 and split it in half. Just when I read through that, that was something I thought. So that's for you guys to decide which one you prioritize. So most developers are going to come in and go, okay, I have, 5 acres. How many units can I possibly sell?
Absolutely.
And
What's the
so-
most can I get
Right,
on this?
right.
Yeah.
You're trying to maximize your bang for your buck. So if they wanted different home layouts or were coupled with a builder, they could stretch that 4 to 4.5 or 5, however large they wanted to do. So that was for you guys to prioritize. I don't think it's a bad thing. I have a couple toys at my house and I like off-street parking, so just something to consider.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
No, I'd like the 15-foot, and then, they could always get variance if there is a parking lot across the street from them that they could fit a manufactured home, then that could be a consideration of why they would get that variance. But like you said, we're driving down streets in town, there's nowhere to park, there's nowhere to drive almost.
No. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and we're gonna open it up for, to public comment. I don't think we have anybody on Zoom, do we? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public comment portion and open it back up to the board for any final questions, comments. If you like what we have. Thank you guys for working on this. It is something we need to do. Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve public hearing number 1, land use department, language amendment, zoning resolution, housing amendments.
I second that.
Any final discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Okay,
thank you, Madam
the
Chair.
island, it's up to you guys now.
So we will have a notice, so in accordance with Administrative Procedures Act, we will have a notice of intent hearing
Mhm.
at the next commissioner meeting, and then it'll be opened up to a 45-day comment period. So keep in mind too, so if there's something in here we missed, let's say someone brings up from the public, an architect or whatever, we can make changes actually after 45 days at the commissioner meeting too. So there's a lot of opportunity to still make changes if there's something in here that we miss. So I appreciate your help on this and discussion. So,
Thank you guys for all the work, because it's something, I can't talk this morning, that we do need to address, and, you know, never having the crystal ball that none of us have, you know, something we should have had a while ago, so we
Yeah.
have this in place by now, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Any other old business or?
The only other business I have is we don't have any scheduled hearings, in January
So
as
far?
of right now, so no
Okay.
meetings.
Wow, okay. All right, hearing that, it is 10:58. We will call, adjourn the meeting. Thank you, guys.